So, about almost 3 years ago, we had a rather interesting leak come out. From this AmmoLand article, there was a Glock carbine that was seen, and Glock was kind of quiet about this, except for one very small statement. Quote, Glock is always in development of future products and technologies through the pursuit of perfection. Ansley Cash Connor, communications manager for Glock, told AmmoLand News. The image shared is of a product developed for select solicitations and is not available in the general market at this time. That is rather interesting. And while we haven't heard anything, I'm wondering, and this is completely wild, totally unfounded speculation on my part, if their recent cancellations of a number of older pistols don't herald in something new coming to the market. Now, granted, I do think it is far, far more likely that we are going to see some kind of a Gen 6, and I've done a bunch of coverage talking about the various patents that Glock is currently sitting on that could potentially be leveraged for a Gen 6 style of pistol. However, conversely, or maybe even at the same time, Glock could take this rifle that they have done an actually quite fair amount of work developing and launch that along with or instead of a completely brand new Gen 6. Anything is possible, and what is going to follow is going to be a whole bunch of wild, completely baseless speculation. However, all of these patents that I am going to show you are specifically for this rifle or something related to it. And the amount of work that Glock has put into this particular carbine is impressive. So, let me show you what they've been sitting on. We're going to rapid fire through all of these different patents. Most of them are not too terribly exciting in their in isolation. However, some of them do have movement on them as recently as 2025 and were filed as recently as just a couple of years ago. So, first one, we have a dust cover for an AR-15 style rifle that you see there. I have a gas-operated firearm with adjustable pressure selector. A design for a gas-powered firearm, nothing too terribly crazy. And then we have a firearm with gas-operated reloading mechanism. We have a firearm with a magazine holder, trigger unit for a firearm, a trigger guard. This you can actually see if we go back to, if we actually go back to it, it looks like that is the same style of trigger guard there that they have patented here, or if not, very similar. Then we have a buttstock for a firearm. Now, this particular one, I wouldn't be super excited for or anything like that, but what is interesting is this was initially submitted back in mid-2024 and has activity on it as recently as April of this year. So, if nothing else, Glock is still doing something with this particular rifle. Maybe it is, as previously claimed, that we are just looking at something for select solicitations, but Glock, to be perfectly honest with you, why would you just leave something like this as a select solicitation only rifle? You could sell gangbusters in the US market. But moving on, they also have a patent for a end plate sling adapter. There's a barrel assembly for a firearm, and this one is from 2024 as well. They have a whole firearm upper receiver design, a bolt for a firearm, secondary handguard mount, and this one also has a activity as recently as late 2024 with a patent grant. Rifle comprising a bolt catch device, firearm with secured firing pin retaining pin, say that 5 times fast, carbine with charging handle assembly, bolt catch design, a barrel for a firearm with locking space and a production process, connection for the upper receiver part and lower receiver part of a firearm, charging handle for a firearm, safety selector designed for a breech block, an adapter for mounting an accessory on a firearm, which again is rather similar to what we saw previously. This guy right here. Then we also have a firearm with an improved barrel connection. And finally, we have a firearm with a improved barrel connection patent. Now, does this mean that we will see this particular rifle show up on the US market or in any market? Who knows? It's entirely possible that Glock wants to keep this as just for specific and select solicitations. However, with this amount of R&D work, if they get any kind of tooling up and running, it would be kind of silly for them to not to try and take advantage of the US market and build rifles for the US market, especially when you have High Point and others going into the rifle game as well. Or we could see a situation like the Glock 46, where we have an interesting and really cool design that honestly never sees the light of day except for a handful of copies in German police hands, I believe is where the Glock 46 ultimately ended up going. But of course, all of this is completely wild speculation. Now, do you think that it's entirely possible that Glock ends up entering into the rifle market? Let me know in the comments section below. And finally, for our last topic of today, I wanted to show off a few more patents that Glock has related to pistols and potentially a few more things that could be dropped into that Glock Gen 6. I have continued to dig around and find a few more patents for them. Now, these aren't quite nearly as interesting as the modular grip design or the change in takedown design. However, these are somewhat interesting. One of them here is for a firearm including an extractor assembly. Then the next one is for a trigger assembly, somewhat slightly different. A multifunctional slide cover plate. Now, what's interesting about this is it might address some of the issues that Glock has with the Glock switch. Now, to truly be able to change up the firing mechanism and fully prevent the current iterations of a Glock switch would take much more than just a changed out firing plate. But I'm wondering if they didn't work on this particular patent in order to address some of those concerns more easily than trying to retool their entire firing mechanism and slide assembly. But who knows? Then we have an interesting patent here for a recoil spring abutment for a slide of a modular handgun specifically. Now, this particular one was initially filed for in 2022 and has just some basic information as of January 2025. Granting procedure in general, so it looks like it's just kind of sitting there at the moment, not really doing anything. I don't see granted status or anything like that, so who knows if this is something that they want to actually leverage. But it is rather interesting that they are looking at some additional designs for the recoil spring assembly. And finally, we do also have a slide and frame for a pistol equipped with the slide and the frame. Say that 5 times fast. Best name for a patent ever, Glock. But hey, who knows? Maybe all of these or maybe none of these will actually end up going into a Glock Gen 6 pistol. Only time will tell, and of course, all I can really do is sit here, show off some of these patents that I found, and do a little bit of theorizing about what Glock might have up their sleeve in the coming months and years. But if you have any thoughts about these particular patents, let me know in the comments below. Now, I do want to thank you all for hanging around and watching this episode of the Cap and Ball Saloon. Hopefully you found it informative and entertaining. We are trying to grow. Our current goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers, so if you can like, share, and comment for me, that would be absolutely amazing. I appreciate every single one of you, and I do try to get down into the comments as frequently as possible to catch up and respond to everyone who leaves a comment. But until next time, I'm Anders E.T. Herzberg for the Cap and Ball Saloon, hoping to see you all again real soon.